The full moon hung low over Thornwald territory, like a wound in the sky. Its silver light spilled through the forest canopy and pooled on the ancient stones of the Alpha compound, illuminating the heavy iron door that led to the underground chamber. Behind that door, chains rattled against stone walls. Behind that door, a man was losing himself piece by piece. Alara Stone pressed her palm flat against the cold metal, feeling the vibrations of struggle from within. 6 months. 6 months since they had defeated Abraxas. 6 months since she had claimed her birthright as the last true heir of the Crimson Shield bloodline. 6 months since she had watched her husband sign divorce papers under a blood moon, only to fight beside her against the darkness that had manipulated them both. 6 months of victory that tasted like ash. The sounds from within the chamber grew more violent. A howl that was neither fully wolf nor fully human tore through the night, and Alara closed her eyes against the pain of it. That sound belonged to Alaric Thornwald, her mate, her partner, the man who had chosen to lock himself away every full moon rather than risk harming those he loved. The shadow scar was killing him slowly, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Reyna appeared at her side, the pack's chief healer, moving with the quiet efficiency that came from decades of practice. At 45, Reyna had seen more wounds than most warriors, had stitched together more broken bodies than she could count. She had been Alara's closest confidant since the early days of the unification, the one person besides Alaric who knew every secret, every fear, every desperate hope that kept their Alpha fighting. The look in her eyes tonight held something Alara had never seen before: helplessness. "The transformation is getting worse." Reyna's voice was barely above a whisper. "His vital signs are erratic. The shadow essence in his blood is spreading faster than I predicted. I've tried every treatment in my arsenal, consulted every text in our library. Nothing slows it down." Alara did not turn from the door. "How long?" The silence that followed was answer enough. "Reyna, how long does he have?" 3 months. Maybe less if he keeps using the scar to gather intelligence." Reyna placed a gentle hand on Alara's shoulder, the touch of a healer who had learned that sometimes comfort mattered more than medicine. "I know you don't want to hear this, but we need to discuss the option. Aaron's energy could potentially draw out the shadow essence. It's the only treatment that might work." Inside the chamber, something heavy slammed against the walls. The iron door shuddered in its frame. "And if we use Aaron's energy for that, he loses his ability to seal the veil permanently." Alara finally turned to face her beta, her eyes reflecting the moonlight with an unnatural crimson tint that had become permanent since her awakening. "We would be trading Alaric's life for the safety of the entire world." "I'm not saying we should do it. I'm saying we need to acknowledge it as an option." Reyna's voice carried the weight of someone who had spent too many nights watching people she cared about suffer. "I've sent messages to healers across 3 continents. If there's another way, I'll find it. But we need to be prepared for the possibility that there isn't. There is no option." The voice came from within the chamber, muffled by stone and iron, but unmistakably Alaric's. The sounds of struggle had ceased abruptly. "There will never be an option that trades the world's future for one man's survival." Alara pressed both hands against the door now, as if she could reach through the metal to touch him. "You don't get to make that decision alone." "I already made it." A pause, filled with labored breathing. 6 months ago, when I first felt this thing spreading through my veins. I made my choice then, Alara. I will not be the reason the veil falls." She wanted to argue. She wanted to tear down the door and hold him and tell him that his life mattered more than ancient barriers between worlds. But she knew that look in his eyes, even though she couldn't see him now. That stubborn determination that had made him alpha of the Thornwald pack for 15 years. That iron will that had never bent, not even when Abraxas had invaded his mind and turned him against everything he loved. Alaric Thornwald would die on his own terms, and no force in heaven or hell would change that. The howling began again, but this time Alara did not flinch. She stood sentinel at the door until dawn broke over the mountains, until the sounds of torment finally faded into exhausted silence, until she heard the familiar click of chains being released from the inside. Reyna had stayed with her through the night, dozing in a chair she had dragged from the guardroom, ready to intervene if Alaric's condition took a sudden turn. It was a vigil they had kept together every full moon for the past 4 months, ever since the transformations had become too dangerous to risk. When Alaric emerged, he looked like a man who had aged 10 years in a single night. His dark hair was streaked with new gray at the temples. Deep shadows carved hollows beneath his eyes. But he walked upright, and when he looked at Alara, something of the man she loved still burned behind the exhaustion. "Still here." His voice was rough from hours of screaming. "Always." Reyna moved forward immediately, her healer's instincts overriding her exhaustion. She pressed her fingers to Alaric's wrist, checking his pulse, then tilted his head to examine his eyes. "The shadow residue is thicker than last month. You need rest. Real rest, not the 4 hours you usually allow yourself before diving back into pack business." "The pack doesn't stop needing leadership because I'm tired. The pack needs their alpha alive." Reyna's voice was sharp with the authority of someone who had been treating Thornwald wolves since before Alaric was born. "You push yourself to collapse, and then what? Alara carries everything alone while you recover? Again?" Alaric had no response to that. They both knew she was right. He reached for Alara then, pulling her against his chest with a desperation that spoke louder than words. She felt his heartbeat against her cheek, steady despite everything, and allowed herself one moment of weakness. One moment where she wasn't the alpha of a united pack, wasn't the inheritor of ancient power, wasn't responsible for the fate of the supernatural world. One moment where she was simply a woman holding the man she loved, knowing that time was stealing him away day by day. "The child moved last night." The words left her lips before she could stop them. For the first time, Alaric's body went rigid against hers. Slowly he pulled back to look at her face. "What did you say?" "I'm pregnant, Alaric. 2 months. I was going to tell you after the full moon passed, but—" She pressed his hand against her abdomen, still flat, but harboring a secret that changed everything. "Our child. The one everyone said we could never have because of the curse." For a long moment, Alaric said nothing. His hand trembled against her stomach, and she watched emotions war across his features. Joy, fear, hope, despair, all of them fighting for dominance, none of them winning. Reyna stepped back, giving them privacy, but Alara caught the glisten of tears in her healer's eyes. Reyna had been the one to confirm the pregnancy, had been the one to run test after test because neither of them could believe it was real. "The curse was broken when you awakened your bloodline." Alaric's voice was hoarse with wonder. "The Crimson Shield power negated the ancient binding. That's what Reyna believes. She's been monitoring the pregnancy closely. Everything looks healthy." "Our child." He said the words like a prayer, like something sacred and terrifying all at once. "Alara, I have 3 months, maybe less. I won't see our child born. I won't hold them. I won't watch them take their first steps, or shift for the first time, or fall in love, or become the alpha they're destined to be." She gripped his face between her palms, forcing him to meet her eyes. "Then we find another way. We find a cure. We find something." "There is no cure for what Abraxas did to me. We both know that." "Then we buy more time. We fight. We do what we've always done, Alaric. We refuse to surrender." Before he could respond, the morning stillness shattered. A horn blast echoed across the valley, the ancient signal that had not been sounded in generations. The warning call, enemy forces approaching Thornwald borders. Nathaniel burst through the compound gates moments later, the former security chief's face grim with urgency. At 50, Nathaniel moved with the coiled efficiency of a man who had spent his entire adult life preparing for moments exactly like this one. He had served 3 generations of Thornwald alphas, had fought in wars that most wolves considered legend, had survived things that would have broken lesser men. The fact that he was running told Alara everything she needed to know about the severity of what was coming. "Report!" Alaric's command voice emerged despite his exhaustion, the alpha authority that decades of leadership had burned into his bones. "An army, Alpha, 200 strong at minimum, approaching from the northern pass. They'll reach our borders within the hour." 200. Alara's mind raced through tactical calculations. "We have 140 warriors available for immediate deployment. We're outnumbered." "That's not the worst part." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "They're flying the Crimson Shield banner. Your banner, Alara. They're claiming to be the true heirs of your bloodline." The world seemed to tilt beneath her feet. The Crimson Shield was her legacy, her birthright, the power that had awakened within her when she had been pushed to the breaking point. There was no one else. Her grandmother had told her that she was the last, the final inheritor of a lineage that stretched back thousands of years. Her grandmother had been wrong. There's something else. Nathaniel hesitated, which was unlike him. A rider arrived an hour before the army was spotted, from the eastern mountains. A messenger from the approaching force? No, Alpha. A messenger from your father-in-law. Nathaniel glanced at Alaric. Marcus Thornwald is returning. He'll arrive by nightfall. The news struck like a second blow. Marcus Thornwald had retreated into the wilderness 3 years ago after the death of his mate and his voluntary abdication of the Alpha position to Alaric. He had refused all contact, all invitations, all attempts to bring him back into pack life. The man who had ruled Thornwald territory for 40 years had simply walked away and never looked back. Until now, Alaric's expression had gone carefully blank, the mask he wore when emotions threatened to overwhelm him. His relationship with his father had always been complicated. Marcus had been demanding, critical, impossible to please. He had opposed Alaric's marriage to Alara, had predicted that the union would bring disaster, had been proven partially right when Abraxas manipulated them into divorce. Did he say why he's coming? Alaric's voice betrayed nothing. The message said only that a father should stand with his son when storms gather. Nathaniel paused, and that he has information about the army approaching from the north. Information? How would a hermit living in the mountains have information about an army we didn't even know existed until 10 minutes ago? I don't know, Alpha. But Marcus Thornwald has never been what he appeared to be. You know that better than anyone. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken history. Alara watched her mate's face, saw the conflict playing out behind his eyes. Whatever his feelings about his father, Marcus represented resources they desperately needed: experience, knowledge, the respect of older pack members who remembered his reign. We deal with the immediate threat first. Alaric straightened, pushing his exhaustion aside through sheer force of will. The army at our borders takes priority. My father can wait until we've addressed the more pressing concern of 200 wolves who want to challenge Alara's claim. Within the hour, Alara stood at the northern border of Thornwald territory. She had ordered Alaric to remain at the compound, citing his weakened state from the night's transformation. He had argued, of course. He had raged and demanded and finally pleaded. But in the end, he had seen the wisdom in her words. If this was a trap, if this army intended to attack, Alaric's presence would be a liability rather than an asset. The shadow scar made him unpredictable, dangerous, a weapon that could turn against them at any moment. So he had stayed behind with Aaron and a guard of 20 warriors, protection for the child who might be the key to everything, and the man whose condition was a closely guarded secret that only a handful of people knew. Reyna had insisted on accompanying Alara to the border, her medical kit strapped across her back. If there's fighting, you'll need a healer. And if there's negotiating, you'll need someone who can read people's body language for signs of deception. She had smiled grimly at Alara's raised eyebrow. Healers learn to spot liars quickly. Patients lie about their symptoms all the time. Alara faced the approaching army with Reyna and Nathaniel flanking her position. It was a statement, a demonstration of confidence. An alpha who needed no army to face 200 warriors was an alpha who feared nothing. The truth was far more complicated, but perception was half the battle. The opposing force emerged from the tree line with military precision that spoke of centuries of discipline. They moved in perfect formation, their ranks organized by apparent hierarchy. At the front rode a figure on a massive gray warhorse, his armor gleaming with the distinctive crimson and silver of the ancient Crimson Shield colors. Colors that Alara had only seen in her grandmother's journals, colors that no living wolf should possess. The rider dismounted with fluid grace that belied his apparent age. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with silver hair cropped close to his skull and a face that bore the marks of countless battles. A scar ran from his left temple to the corner of his jaw, pale against weathered skin. His eyes were the same crimson shot through with gold that Alara saw every time she looked in a mirror. Crimson Shield eyes. "I am General Mordecai Vance." His voice carried across the clearing without effort, the voice of a man accustomed to commanding armies. "By right of blood and lineage, I am the grandson of the first Crimson Alpha. I have come to reclaim what belongs to my family." Alara did not flinch, did not show a flicker of the shock cascading through her system. "I am Alara Stone, the last heir of the Crimson Shield bloodline, and you, General, are either a liar or a ghost." "Neither." Mordecai approached slowly, his hands visible and empty, his posture one of parley rather than aggression. "I am simply a man who has waited 400 years for this moment." 400 years. The number struck her like a physical blow. 4 centuries of waiting, 4 centuries of planning, 4 centuries of survival when the rest of the bloodline had been hunted to extinction. "My grandmother told me I was the last, that our bloodline had been systematically destroyed." "Your grandmother was a child when it happened. She knew only what she was told." Mordecai stopped 10 feet from where Alara stood, his crimson eyes studying her with an intensity that felt like being weighed on cosmic scales. "The truth is far more complicated. When Abraxas rose the first time, 400 years ago, I was a young commander in the Crimson Shield Army. I led the force that pushed him back to the Veil. But in doing so, I was caught in the ceiling. Trapped in the space between worlds for 4 centuries, neither alive nor dead, while my entire lineage was slaughtered by those who feared what we might become. And now you've returned. When you defeated Abraxas 6 months ago, the seal weakened enough for me to finally escape. I have spent half a year gathering what remains of those loyal to the old ways, rebuilding the army that was once the pride of our people." His gaze never wavered from hers. "I did not come here to fight you, child. I came here to take my rightful place." "Which is?" "Alpha of the Crimson Shield." The words hung in the air between them like a drawn blade. Around them, the tension was palpable. Raina's hand had drifted toward her medical kit, where Alara knew she kept weapons disguised as instruments. Nathaniel had shifted his weight to the balls of his feet, ready to move at the first sign of violence. The 200 warriors behind Mordecai had not moved, but their attention was laser-focused on every twitch of the confrontation. "I already hold that title." Alara kept her voice steady. "I awakened the full power of our bloodline. I defeated Abraxas. I united the Thornwald and Stone Packs under one banner. What right do you have that supersedes those achievements? The right of seniority, the right of experience, the right of a warrior who has fought more battles than you have lived years." Mordecai's tone held no malice, only the certainty of a man stating obvious facts. "You are powerful, child. I can feel the strength radiating from you like heat from a forge. But power is not leadership. Strength is not wisdom. You have ruled for 6 months. I commanded armies before your great-grandmother was born. And yet you were trapped in a void while I freed the world from the monster you failed to destroy completely." Something flickered in Mordecai's eyes. Not anger. Something closer to approval. "You have fire. Good. A leader without fire is a leader without purpose." He paused, seeming to consider his next words carefully. "I did not come here to wage war against my own blood. I came to offer an alternative." "What alternative?" "An alliance. You remain alpha of this territory, keeper of the awakened Crimson Shield power. I become your general, your military commander, your advisor in matters of war and strategy. Together, we rebuild what was lost. Together, we restore the Crimson Shield to its former glory." It was a reasonable offer, too reasonable. Alara had learned enough about politics and power in the last 6 months to know that no one offered partnerships without wanting something in return. "What do you want, General? What is the price of this alliance?" Mordecai's expression did not change, but something shifted in his posture, a slight tension that had not been there before. "The child, the one you call Aaron, I want him placed under my guidance." Every protective instinct Alara possessed roared to life. Her power surged against her control, crimson energy crackling at her fingertips before she forced it back down. Aaron. He wanted Aaron, the baby who had been born of shadow and manipulated bloodlines, the child who carried the essence of both Abraxas's darkness and the stolen potential of the Thornwald line, the infant who had become as much her son as if she had carried him in her own body. "Absolutely not. You misunderstand my intentions." Mordecai raised a placating hand. "I do not wish to harm the boy. I wish to train him, to help him understand and control the power he carries. That child is the most dangerous weapon this world has ever seen, Alara. In the wrong hands, he could tear apart the very fabric of reality. In the right hands, he could become a guardian unlike any who has come before." "And you believe your hands are the right ones?" "I believe I am the only one alive with the knowledge to guide him. 400 years ago, I studied under the scholars who first understood the nature of the veil and the entities beyond it. I have seen what happens when hybrid power goes untrained. I watched good wolves become monsters because no one taught them to master what they were. His voice softened almost imperceptibly. I do not ask this lightly. I ask it because I have seen the alternative, and it haunts me still. Alara's mind raced through the implications. Mordecai's offer was not inherently evil. If he was telling the truth about his knowledge, Aaron could benefit enormously from his guidance. The child's powers were already manifesting in ways that frightened everyone around him. Last week, he had made his shadow move independently. The week before, he had spoken a word in a language no one recognized, and every light in the compound had flickered out for 30 seconds. But giving Aaron to a stranger, even one who shared her blood, felt like betrayal, felt like abandonment. She had promised that child she would protect him, would love him, would never let him feel unwanted the way she had once felt. I need time to consider your proposal. Of course. Mordecai inclined his head in acknowledgement. I did not expect an immediate answer. These are not decisions to be made in haste. He turned to gesture at his army. My forces will make camp 5 miles north of your border. We will not advance. We will not engage your patrols. We are here as potential allies, not as invaders. And if I refuse your offer entirely? Mordecai's expression remained neutral, but something hardened in his ancient eyes. Then I will be forced to pursue my claim through the traditional channels. The Council of Alphas still holds authority over disputes of lineage. They would determine the rightful leader of the Crimson Shield based on heritage, experience, and demonstrated capability. The Council of Alphas, a governing body that Alara had avoided since her awakening, knowing that they viewed her ascension with suspicion and hostility. A council dominated by old wolves who remembered the glory days of the Crimson Shield and resented that its power had passed to an Omega who had been discarded by her own mate. Going before the council would mean politics, would mean manipulation and ancient grudges and alliances that predated her birth, would mean putting everything she had built at risk. You would challenge me through bureaucracy rather than combat? I have learned that some battles are won more decisively in chambers than on fields. Mordecai's smile held no warmth. Think carefully, Alara Stone. The alliance I offer gives you everything you want with minimal cost. The alternative gives neither of us what we truly need. He turned and walked back toward his army without waiting for a response, mounting his warhorse with the practiced ease of someone who had spent centuries in the saddle. Within minutes, the 200 warriors had reversed their formation and begun marching north, moving with the same silent precision that had marked their arrival. Alara watched them go, her heart pounding against her ribs. That went better than expected. Nathaniel's voice was carefully neutral. Did it? He could have attacked. 200-3. The odds were in his favor. The odds are never that simple when Crimson Shield faces Crimson Shield. Alara turned to face her advisors. What do you know about the Council of Alphas, Nathaniel? What are we dealing with if Mordecai takes his claim to them? The old warrior's face grew troubled. The council hasn't convened for a major lineage dispute in over a century. The process is complicated, political, full of opportunities for manipulation by those who have spent decades cultivating influence. And Mordecai, does he have influence? I don't know. But if he's been free for 6 months and has already gathered 200 loyal warriors, he clearly knows how to build power quickly. Nathaniel paused, choosing his next words with care. There's something else you should know. One of the men in his retinue looked familiar. Victor Hale. We served together in the territorial wars before you were born. He was one of the best soldiers I ever fought beside. Is that relevant? It means Mordecai has been recruiting quality. Victor wouldn't follow a madman or a fraud. If he's pledged himself to the general, there's something there worth following. Reyna had remained silent throughout the exchange, her healer's eyes studying the retreating army with professional assessment. Now she spoke. There's a more immediate concern. Mordecai mentioned the council, but he didn't mention the Shadow Council. Alara frowned. The what? An informal group within the larger council. 3 of the oldest alphas who pull strings from behind the scenes. They've existed in some form or another for at least 300 years, though their membership changes as the ancient ones die off. Reyna's expression was grim. I know about them, because I treated one of their members once, decades ago, before I came to Thornwald. He spoke of them in his fever dreams, called them the true power behind every major decision the Council has made. Why am I only hearing about this now? Because I wasn't sure they were relevant to your situation. You were building your own power base, unifying the packs, establishing yourself as Alpha. The Shadow Council seemed like a distant threat compared to the immediate challenges you faced. Reyna met her eyes steadily. But if Mordecai is planning to take his claim to the official council, you can be certain the Shadow Council is already aware. They'll see this as an opportunity to influence the future of the Crimson Shield bloodline, an opportunity they've probably been waiting generations for. The weight of it all pressed down on Alara's shoulders like a physical burden. Mordecai's army, the Council of Alphas, the Shadow Council, Alaric's deteriorating condition, her pregnancy, Aaron's dangerous and unpredictable power. Every direction she looked, another threat loomed on the horizon. And somewhere in the northern forest, 200 warriors loyal to a man 4 centuries old were making camp, waiting to see which way the wind would blow. She turned toward home, toward the compound where Alaric waited with their adopted son and the child growing within her. Whatever came next, she needed to face it with her family at her side. The journey back took longer than it should have. Alara moved slowly, processing everything that had happened, trying to formulate a plan from the chaos of competing crises. By the time she reached the compound gates, the sun had climbed to its midday position, casting harsh shadows across the courtyard. Alaric was waiting for her, but he was not alone. Beside him stood a man who looked like an older, harder version of her mate. Silver hair where Alaric's was dark, deeper lines carved by decades of additional experience, eyes that held the same steel-blue intensity but tempered by something that might have been regret. Marcus Thornwald had arrived early. "Father." Alaric's voice was carefully neutral. "You came." "I said I would." Marcus's gaze swept over Alara, assessing her with the practiced eye of a man who had judged countless wolves over his lifetime. Whatever conclusion he reached, he kept it to himself. "You've chosen well, son. She carries herself like an alpha. The real thing, not the pretenders who wear the title without understanding its weight." "She's standing right here." Alara stepped forward, refusing to be spoken about as if she were absent. And she would appreciate being addressed directly. Something that might have been approval flickered across Marcus's weathered face. "Fire. Good. You'll need it for what's coming." He turned to address them both. "I received word 3 weeks ago that Mordecai Vance had escaped the void. I've spent every day since then gathering information, calling in debts from wolves who owed me favors from decades past. What I've learned is troubling." "How did you know about Mordecai before we did?" Alaric's suspicion was evident. "Because I've been watching the signs since your mate defeated Abraxas. The old powers are stirring. Things that were sealed away are breaking free. Mordecai was just the beginning." Marcus paused, his expression darkening. "The Shadow Council has been preparing for this moment for centuries. They believe they can control what's coming. They're wrong, but their arrogance will cause tremendous damage before they realize their error." "You know about the Shadow Council." "I've known about them since before you were born, son. Why do you think I pushed you so hard? Why do you think I demanded perfection in everything you did?" For the first time, emotion cracked the old Alpha's stoic facade. "I was trying to prepare you for a war I knew was coming. I failed. I pushed too hard, demanded too much, drove you away when I should have drawn you close. And then when your mother died, I couldn't face my failures any longer. So I ran." The silence that followed was heavy with years of unspoken pain. Alara watched the two men face each other across a gulf of misunderstanding and regret, neither willing to take the first step toward reconciliation. She took it for them. "We don't have time for old grudges. Mordecai has 200 warriors camped at our border. The Shadow Council apparently wants to use Aaron as some kind of weapon. My mate is dying from a shadow curse, and I'm pregnant with a child who might be the first natural-born Crimson Shield in generations." She looked at Marcus with the authority she had earned through blood and sacrifice. "You have information we need. You have experience we can use. But if you're here to relitigate old arguments with your son, you can walk back to whatever mountain you've been hiding in." Marcus stared at her for a long moment. Then unexpectedly he laughed. A rough sound, rusty from years of disuse, but genuine. "Fire indeed." He turned to Alaric, and something had softened in his expression. "She's magnificent. I was wrong to oppose your marriage, wrong about many things." He straightened, the former alpha reasserting himself. "I'm not here to argue, son. I'm here to help. Whatever you need, whatever she needs, I'll provide it. Consider it the first step toward amends I should have made years ago." "Father," Alaric's voice cracked slightly. "Later. We'll talk later when there's time for words that have waited too long already." Marcus looked at Alara. "Right now, you need to know what I know about the Shadow Council and their plans, because Mordecai Vance is the least of your problems." They moved inside, gathering in the great hall where maps and documents had been spread across every available surface. Nathaniel joined them, followed by Raina, who had spent the walk back sending messages to her network of healers and informants. Marcus stood at the head of the table, the old authority settling over him like a familiar cloak. The Shadow Council consists of 3 alphas: Malachar the Elder, who has lived so long that no one remembers his origins; Selene Blackthorn, whose beauty hides a capacity for cruelty that would make Abraxas himself proud; and Darius Blackmoon, who serves as head of the official council while secretly directing the Shadow version. "Darius Blackmoon," Nathaniel's voice was sharp. "He presided over my promotion ceremony 40 years ago. He seemed honorable." "He's exceptionally good at seeming things. It's how he survived this long." Marcus traced lines on one of the maps. "The Shadow Council has been manipulating supernatural politics for centuries. They orchestrated the destruction of the Crimson Shield bloodline 300 years ago, convincing the official council that the power was too dangerous to exist unchecked. They've allowed certain dark entities to gain footholds in our world because they believed they could control them. Abraxas was one such entity." Alara felt cold. "They allowed Abraxas to rise? They facilitated it. They thought a controlled threat would give them leverage over the other packs, force everyone to unite under their leadership. They miscalculated badly." Marcus's expression was grim. Now they're trying again. They see Aaron as a second chance, a hybrid of shadow and wolf that they believe they can shape into the ultimate weapon. "Mordecai wants to train Aaron. Is he working with them?" "No. Mordecai hates the Shadow Council with a passion that 400 years of imprisonment has only intensified. They're the ones who arranged for him to be trapped in the void in the first place, to remove him as a potential obstacle to their plans." Marcus shook his head. "Whatever else he might be, Mordecai Vance is an enemy of your enemies. That doesn't make him a friend, but it might make him useful." Alaric had remained silent throughout his father's briefing, absorbing information with the tactical mind that had made him an effective alpha. Now he spoke. "You said the Shadow Council has plans for Aaron. Do you know specifics?" "They want to use his connection to Abraxas to open a gateway. Not to let Abraxas through, but to draw power from the void. Power they believe they can channel and control." Marcus met his son's eyes. "To do that, they need the child. And they don't care how many people they have to kill to get him." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Alara thought of Aaron sleeping peacefully in his nursery, unaware of the forces that saw him as nothing more than a tool to be used and discarded. "Then we protect him." Her voice left no room for argument. "Whatever it takes, whatever alliances we have to make, whatever enemies we have to face, that child is under my protection, and I will burn down anyone who tries to take him." "That's exactly what I hoped you'd say." Marcus almost smiled. "Now, let's talk about how we're going to fight a shadow war against an enemy that's had centuries to prepare." The planning continued through the afternoon and into the evening. Raina proved invaluable, her network of contacts providing information that even Marcus hadn't known. Nathaniel contributed tactical expertise from decades of practical experience, and Alaric, despite his exhaustion, offered insights that reminded everyone why he had been Alpha before Alara claimed the title. As night fell, Alara found a moment alone with her maid on the balcony overlooking the compound. The moon was rising again, not yet full, but waxing toward another cycle of torment. "Your father," she began. "I know." Alaric's voice was quiet. "He's trying. I can see it. And I want to forgive him. Want to let go of all the anger I've carried for so long, but it's hard." "Hard isn't impossible." "No, it isn't." He pulled her close, his hand resting on her stomach where their daughter grew. "We're going to have a family, Alara, a real family with children who have grandparents who love them and aunts and uncles who spoil them and a pack that will protect them with their lives. I want to believe that's possible." "It is possible. We'll make it possible. Even if I'm not here to see it." She turned in his arms, gripping his face with fierce determination. "You will be here. We will find a way to beat this thing inside you, and you will be there when our daughter is born, and you will hold her and love her and watch her grow up. I refuse to accept any other outcome." Before he could respond, the shadow scar pulsed beneath his skin. Alaric's eyes went distant, his attention pulled towards something only he could perceive. "What is it?" Alara demanded. "I heard something, through the scar." His voice was strained. Whispers in the darkness. Plans being made. "What plans?" "The Shadow Council. They've sent assassins. The Moonless Blades." Alaric's face was pale when his focus returned to her. "And their target isn't you." "Then who?" "Aaron, they're coming for Aaron, and they'll be here within days." The words fell between them like stones into still water. Alara felt the world shift beneath her feet, felt the last illusion of safety crumble into dust. The war had begun, and her son was the first target. She straightened her spine and met her mate's eyes with the steel that had carried her through every crisis since her awakening. "Then we'd better make sure they find more than they bargained for." Alaric nodded, a grim smile touching his lips. "The Moonless Blades are good, the best assassins in the supernatural world. I've faced worse." "Have you?" Alara thought of Abraxas, thought of her own mate turned against her, thought of the darkness that had tried to consume everything she loved and failed. "Yes," she said simply, "I have." And somewhere in the northern forest, 200 warriors loyal to General Mordecai Vance waited for word of an alliance that might determine the fate of them all. The game had changed, but Alara Stone was through being a piece on someone else's board. It was time to become a player. The dead forest earned its name from the absence of moonlight. No matter how bright the sky above, no matter how full the lunar disk, the ancient trees swallowed every silver ray before it could touch the ground. Legend said that a great battle had been fought here centuries ago, that so much blood had soaked into the soil that the earth itself had become cursed. Whether the legends were true or not, one thing was certain. In the dead forest, darkness was absolute. Alaric Thornwald moved through that darkness like a ghost, his feet finding purchase on roots and stones that his eyes could not see. The shadow scar pulsed beneath his skin, a living thing that fed on the absence of light, that grew stronger with every step deeper into the cursed woodland. He hated using it, hated the way it whispered to him in voices that were not quite human, hated the way it showed him things that no mortal was meant to see. But tonight he needed every advantage the scar could provide. 50 warriors moved behind him in perfect silence, a mixed force of Thornwald veterans and Mordecai's century-trained soldiers. They had been traveling for 6 hours, following a trail that only Alaric could perceive. The shadow scar allowed him to sense disturbances in the darkness, ripples in the fabric of shadow that marked where the moonless blades had passed. It was like following footprints in fresh snow, except the snow was made of nightmares, and the footprints burned with malevolent purpose. General Mordecai walked at Alaric's right shoulder, moving with the fluid grace of a predator despite his apparent age. 400 years of survival had honed the old warrior into something beyond ordinary wolf. He made no sound, left no trace, existed in the darkness as naturally as if he had been born to it. Perhaps he had been. 4 centuries in the void between worlds would change anyone. Victor Hale flanked Mordecai's other side, his presence a constant reminder of complicated loyalties and old friendships tested by time. Nathaniel had wanted to come on this mission, had argued vehemently for his inclusion, but Alara had overruled him. She needed her head of security at the compound, watching for the spies they now knew lurked among their people. Nathaniel had accepted the decision with the discipline of a career soldier, but Alaric had seen the frustration in his eyes, the frustration of a man who wanted to fight beside his brothers and was forced to wait instead. Alaric understood that frustration intimately. Every step deeper into the dead forest took him further from Alara, further from Aaron, further from the unborn daughter he might never live to see. The shadow scar was consuming him faster now, accelerated by the darkness surrounding him. He could feel memories slipping away like water through cupped fingers. Small things at first, the name of his childhood dog, the taste of his mother's cooking, the sound of rain on the roof of the house where he grew up. Each memory lost was a piece of himself he would never recover. But if losing himself meant protecting his family, Alaric would pay that price without hesitation. Some things were worth more than personal survival. Some things demanded sacrifice. The scar pulsed sharply, and Alaric raised his fist in the silent signal to halt. Around him, 50 warriors froze in place, weapons ready, senses straining against the impenetrable dark. "They're close." His voice was barely a whisper, meant only for Mordecai's ears. "I can feel them." 12 distinct signatures, just like the intelligence suggested. "Formation? Spread out. They know we're coming. They're waiting." Mordecai's teeth gleamed briefly in the darkness. "Then let's not keep them waiting any longer." The general's hand moved in a complex series of gestures, commands that his warriors had learned over centuries of shared combat. The 50 fighters began spreading out, forming a net that would tighten around the enemy position. It was a classic encirclement maneuver, one that Alaric recognized from his own military training. But something felt wrong. The shadow scar was screaming at him now, warning of danger that his conscious mind couldn't identify. The 12 signatures ahead were real. The moonless blades were definitely there, waiting in ambush formation. Everything matched the intelligence they had gathered. Everything except the feeling in his gut that said they were walking into a trap. "General?" Alaric grabbed Mordecai's arm, pulling him close. "Something's not right. The scar is warning me." "Warning you of what?" "I don't know. I can't see it clearly, but there's something here that doesn't match. Something we're missing." Mordecai studied him for a long moment, ancient eyes weighing the value of instinct against the demands of tactical necessity. "How reliable is this scar of yours?" "It's never been wrong. It shows me shadows and secrets, things hidden from normal perception. If it says something's wrong, something's wrong." "Then we proceed with caution." Mordecai's hand moved again, modifying the orders he had given moments before. "Victor, take 10 men and circle wide to the east. If this is a trap, I want eyes on whatever's waiting for us." Victor nodded once and melted into the darkness with his assigned warriors, disappearing so completely that even the shadow scar struggled to track them. They waited. Minutes stretched into an eternity of tense silence. The darkness pressed against them like a physical weight, and Alaric felt the scar feeding on that darkness, growing stronger even as it consumed more of his memories. He tried to hold on to thoughts of Alara, of their daughter, of the life they had built together, but the images kept slipping away, replaced by shadows and whispers and the cold certainty that he was running out of time. Victor's signal came 15 minutes later, 3 short whistles, the code for enemy contact. But there was something else in those notes, a tremor that spoke of shock, of something unexpected and terrible. They found Victor standing at the edge of a small clearing, his face pale in the ambient glow of the scar's enhanced perception. Before him, 12 figures knelt in a row, their heads bowed, their hands bound behind their backs. The moonless blades, the legendary assassins that had terrorized the supernatural world for centuries. Captured, defeated, waiting like lambs for slaughter. And standing behind them, very much not a prisoner, was a face that Alaric knew better than his own. Freya Thornwald smiled at her brother with eyes that held no recognition, no warmth, no trace of the sister who had taught him to climb trees and kept his secrets and cried at his wedding. Her smile was cold and empty, the smile of a weapon wearing human skin. "Hello, brother." Her voice was wrong, layered with harmonics that no human throat could produce. "I've been waiting for you." The world tilted beneath Alaric's feet. Freya, his little sister, the one family member who had always believed in him, who had defended him when their father criticized, who had sent letters from Europe every month without fail until 6 months ago when the letters had simply stopped. He had assumed she was busy, assumed she was caught up in her research, her studies of ancient bloodlines and forgotten histories. He had never imagined that her silence meant something far worse. "What did they do to you?" The words scraped past his throat like broken glass. "They opened my eyes." Freya's head tilted at an angle that was subtly inhuman. "The Shadow Council showed me the truth about our family, about the weakness that runs through our blood, about the need for strength in the coming darkness." She gestured at the bound assassins before her. "These were supposed to be my soldiers, my instruments for cleansing the corruption that threatens our kind. But they failed. They questioned orders. They hesitated when hesitation meant death. Freya, listen to me. Whatever they did to you, whatever they put in your head, it's not real. You're being controlled." "Controlled?" Laughter spilled from her lips, beautiful and terrible. "I've never been more free. The doubts are gone. The fears are gone. The pathetic sentimentality that made me weak is gone." She stepped forward, moving between the kneeling assassins with the grace of a dancer. Do you know what I remember most clearly, Alaric? The day you chose her over family. The day you told Father that you would marry the stone woman regardless of his objections. You broke his heart that day. You broke mine. That's not true. You supported my marriage. You stood beside me at the ceremony. I smiled and played my part because that's what weakness demanded. Inside, I was screaming. Inside, I was dying with every vow you spoke to a woman who wasn't worthy of our bloodline. Freya's smile widened into something monstrous. But now I understand. Elara Stone wasn't the disease. She was the symptom. The real corruption runs deeper. It's in the blood itself, in the mixing of lines that should have remained pure, in the creation of abominations like the child you've adopted as your own. Aaron is innocent. Aaron is a weapon waiting to be fired, and weapons that can't be controlled must be destroyed. She moved then, faster than anything human should be able to move. One moment she was standing among the captive assassins. The next she was in front of Alaric, her hand wrapped around his throat, her fingers digging into flesh with strength that should have been impossible for her slender frame. I could kill you now. Her breath was cold against his face. It would be easy. A twist of my wrist and your spine separates from your skull. The Shadow Council would reward me greatly for eliminating the man who helped destroy their plan for Abraxas. Then do it. Alaric didn't struggle, didn't try to break free, just looked into his sister's eyes and searched for any trace of the girl she used to be. If you're really gone, if my sister is truly dead, then finish what you started. Something flickered in Freya's gaze, a moment of hesitation, a crack in the armor of whatever had been done to her mind. You think I won't? I think part of you is still in there. Part of you remembers teaching me to skip stones at the lake behind our house. Part of you remembers the night I found you crying because a boy had broken your heart, and I sat with you until dawn telling you that anyone who couldn't see how amazing you were didn't deserve your tears. Alaric's voice softened despite the grip crushing his windpipe. That Freya is still alive, and she's fighting right now, fighting against whatever darkness they've planted in her mind. You're wrong. Then why am I still breathing? Freya's hand trembled against his throat. Her eyes were wild now, caught between two conflicting imperatives: the conditioning that demanded his death, the love that refused to let her deliver the killing blow. You don't understand what they did to me. Her voice cracked, and for just a moment, Alaric heard his sister beneath the monster's mask. The pain, Alaric. The endless pain until I agreed to become what they wanted, until I couldn't remember anything except the mission, the purpose, the need to serve. I understand more than you know. He raised his hand slowly, carefully, and pressed it against his own chest where the shadow scar burned beneath his skin. I've felt Abraxas in my mind. I've known what it's like to be controlled, to have something else pulling your strings while you scream inside, and I know that it can be broken, that you can come back from it. The conditioning is too strong. Even if I wanted to resist, even if I tried to break free, the Shadow Council would know. They would activate the failsafe and I would die. Then we find another way. Alaric moved his hand from his chest to her face, cupping her cheek with the gentleness of a brother who had never stopped loving her. Let me help you, Freya. Let me take the darkness out of you the way I should have been there to stop them from putting it in. How? It was a question that had no good answer. The shadow scar could absorb darkness, could draw out the malevolent energy that the Shadow Council had used to control her. But every time he used that ability, he lost more of himself, more memories, more of the man he used to be. Looking at his sister's tortured face, Alaric made his choice, the same way I do everything else. He smiled sadly, by sacrificing what I have to save what matters. He reached deep into the shadow scar, deeper than he had ever gone before, found the core of darkness that lived within him, the piece of Abraxas that had been left behind when the entity was sealed away, and he pulled. The pain was indescribable. It felt like his soul was being torn in half, like every nerve in his body was on fire simultaneously. The shadow scar responded to his call, extending tendrils of dark energy that wrapped around Freya, around the foreign presence that had invaded her mind, around the chains that the Shadow Council had used to bind her will to their purpose. And it began to draw that poison out, Freya screamed, a sound of pure agony that echoed through the dead forest and sent birds fleeing from trees miles away. Her grip on Alaric's throat released as her body convulsed, as the darkness that had controlled her fought against being expelled. Mordecai and Victor moved to intervene, but Alaric waved them back with a desperate gesture. This had to be done. This had to be completed. If he stopped now, if he let the process end prematurely, the Shadow Council's hold on Freya would only grow stronger. So he kept pulling, kept drawing the poison into himself, felt it mixing with the shadow scar, feeding the darkness that was already consuming him from within. Memories began to cascade away. The face of his mother faded to nothing. His father's voice became a distant echo he could no longer identify. The name of his first love, the girl he had courted before Alara, vanished as if it had never existed. Still he pulled. His wedding day dissolved into fragments. He could remember standing at an altar, could remember feeling joy and hope and love, but the faces around him were blurring. The words spoken were becoming static. Only Alara remained clear. Her image burned so deeply into his heart that even the shadow scar couldn't erase it entirely. Still he pulled. 10 years of memories gone, the price of saving his sister. 10 years of experiences and relationships and moments that had made him who he was, surrendered to the darkness so that Freya could be free. Finally, mercifully, it ended. Freya collapsed to the forest floor, unconscious but breathing. The foreign presence was gone from her mind, purged by the shadow scar's hungry consumption. She was herself again, or would be when she woke. Alaric stood over her, swaying on feet that no longer seemed to belong to him. The world was strange now, unfamiliar. He knew he was in a forest, knew that enemies surrounded them, knew that something important had just happened. But the details were foggy, obscured by gaps in his memory that yawned like chasms. "Alaric!" Mordecai's voice cut through the confusion. "Can you hear me? Are you still with us?" He turned to face the general, and for a terrifying moment, he didn't recognize the man standing before him. Then the shadow scar pulsed, feeding him information, context, identity. "General Mordecai Vance, commander of the Crimson Shield Forces, ally." The words came automatically, extracted from the scar's dark knowledge rather than his own memory. "You don't remember me, do you?" Mordecai's voice was gentle, understanding. "The price of what you just did." "I remember enough." Alaric looked down at his sister's prone form. "Is she free?" "She appears to be. The shadow taint is gone from her aura." "Good." He swayed again, and strong hands caught him before he could fall. Victor, steady and reliable despite their complicated history. "The moonless blades, what about them?" "Still bound, still waiting." Mordecai gestured toward the kneeling assassins who had watched the entire exchange in stunned silence. "Your sister was their handler. With her conditioning broken, they're leaderless." "They're also witnesses." Victor's voice was grim. "Witnesses to what just happened. If word gets back to the Shadow Council that their asset has been compromised, then we make sure word doesn't get back." Alaric straightened, pushing through the disorientation by sheer force of will. "Question them. Find out everything they know about the Shadow Council, about the plan to kidnap Aaron, about any other assets that might be positioned against us. Then we decide what to do with them." "And if they won't talk?" Alaric looked at the 12 assassins, really looked at them for the first time. They were young, most of them barely out of their 20s, weapons shaped by cruelty and conditioning, not so different from what had been done to Freya. "Everyone breaks eventually." His voice held a darkness that hadn't been there before, an edge that came from having too much shadow inside him. "But give them the choice first. Loyalty to masters who see them as disposable tools or a chance at something better." The interrogation took hours. One by one, the moonless blades were separated from their companions and questioned. Some resisted at first, bound by years of conditioning and fear of retribution. But as word spread that Freya had been freed, that it was possible to escape the Shadow Council's control, that resistance crumbled. By dawn, Alaric had learned more about the Shadow Council than anyone alive outside their inner circle. 3 alphas formed the core of the organization. Malachar the Elder, a wolf so ancient that even Mordecai didn't know his true age. Selene Blackthorn, the only female alpha to have held her position for more than 2 centuries. And Darius Blackmoon, the current head of the official Council of Alphas, whose public role concealed his true power. The Shadow Council had been manipulating supernatural politics for at least 500 years. They had orchestrated the destruction of the Crimson Shield bloodline. They had allowed Abraxas to rise because they believed they could control him. They had planned to use Aaron as a key to bring the dark entity back under their dominion. And they had eyes everywhere, in every major pack, in every position of power, reporting back through channels so subtle that even the most paranoid alpha would never detect them. The spies in your compound. One of the younger assassins, a woman who had broken more quickly than the others, provided the final piece of the puzzle. It's not one person, it's 3, and one of them has been with your pack since before you were born. Names. She gave them. 3 names that Alaric wrote down, despite not recognizing any of them. His memory loss made the information meaningless to him personally, but he knew that Alara and Nathaniel would understand. By the time they began the journey back to Thornwald territory, the sun had fully risen. The dead forest seemed less oppressive in daylight, though the trees still blocked most of the light, and the air still carried a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. Alaric walked at the head of the column. Freya carried on a stretcher behind him. She hadn't woken yet, but her breathing was steady, and her color was good. Whatever damage the forced extraction had done to her mind, it wasn't fatal. She would recover. He wasn't sure he could say the same about himself. The gaps in his memory were worse than he had initially realized. He couldn't remember his own age, couldn't remember how he had met Alara, only that she was his mate and that he loved her. Couldn't remember the circumstances of their divorce and reconciliation, only fragments that didn't form a coherent narrative. The shadow scar had taken 10 years of his life, 10 years that he could never get back, but Freya was free. And the information they had gathered would help protect Aaron, would help protect Alara, would help protect the daughter he might never live to see born. Some prices were worth paying. They reached the edge of Thornwald territory by mid-afternoon. Alara was waiting for them at the border, flanked by Nathaniel, Reyna, and a full security detail. Her eyes found Alaric's immediately, and he saw the moment she realized something had changed. "Report." Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly at her sides. "The moonless blades have been neutralized, 12 assets captured and interrogated, full intelligence on the Shadow Council obtained, including the identities of their spies in our compound." Alaric delivered the information mechanically, relying on notes he had written because he couldn't trust his memory to retain details. One additional development. He stepped aside to reveal the stretcher bearing Freya's unconscious form. Alara's breath caught. "Freya? But she was in Europe. We thought she was safe." "The Shadow Council captured her months ago, conditioned her, made her the handler for the moonless blades." Alaric's voice remained flat, emotionless. "I extracted the conditioning. She's free now." "Extracted? How?" "The shadow scar." Understanding dawned in Alara's eyes, followed immediately by horror. "Alaric, what did it cost you?" He looked at the woman he loved, the woman whose face was the only clear memory he had left from the last decade of his life. "I don't remember our wedding. I don't remember the first time you told me you loved me. I don't remember our divorce or our reconciliation or most of the last 10 years we spent together." "No," the word escaped her like a wound. "I remember that I love you. I remember that you're carrying our daughter. I remember that I would give anything to protect our family." He took her hands in his, feeling the connection that transcended memory. "Everything else is just details." Alara's tears fell freely now, tracking silver lines down her cheeks. "You should have let me do it. You should have let me find another way." "There was no other way, and it was my sister. My responsibility." He pulled her close, breathing in her scent, letting it anchor him to a present that made sense even when the past had become a fog. "I'm still here, still fighting, still yours." "For how long?" The question was barely a whisper against his chest. He didn't answer. They both knew the truth. The shadow scar was progressing faster now, fed by the darkness he had absorbed from Freya. 3 months had become less, perhaps much less. But that was a problem for later. Right now they had spies to root out, a shadow council to defeat, a child to protect. Reyna stepped forward, her healer's eyes assessing Alaric's condition with professional concern. "You need medical attention, both of you." She gestured toward Freya's stretcher. "Bring her to the medical wing. I'll examine her first, then you. The mission debrief can wait until I've confirmed neither of you is about to collapse." Reyna's voice brooked no argument. She had been running the medical wing for 20 years, and in that domain, even alphas deferred to her authority. Nathaniel can begin securing the compound based on the spy information. Ilara can coordinate with Marcus and Mordecai. But you are going to sit in my examination room and let me assess the damage. Or so help me, I will have you carried there. Despite everything, a ghost of a smile crossed Alaric's face. Yes, healer. Don't you yes healer me, move. The medical wing was a converted section of the old manor house, equipped with everything from surgical suites to recovery rooms. Reyna had built it from nothing over 2 decades, gradually expanding its capabilities until it rivaled any human hospital in the region. Freya was placed in the primary care room, monitors attached, fluids administered. Reyna examined her with the thorough efficiency of long practice, checking vitals, testing reflexes, scanning for any residual shadow contamination. The conditioning is completely gone, she finally reported, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. Whatever you did, it worked. She's clean. Will she remember what happened? What they made her do? Reyna hesitated. Probably. The memories are still there. The conditioning suppressed her own personality, but it didn't erase her experiences. When she wakes, she'll have to live with the knowledge of what she did while under their control. That might be worse than not remembering. It might be, but it's also necessary. She can't heal from trauma she doesn't remember. She can't make amends for actions she doesn't recall. Reyna's voice softened. I'll be here when she wakes. I'll help her through it. Thank you, Reyna, for everything. Don't thank me yet. I haven't examined you. She pointed to the adjacent room. Sit. I'll be there in a moment. Alaric's examination was more complicated. The shadow scar defied conventional medical analysis, existing in a space between physical and metaphysical that Reyna's instruments could barely detect. But she did what she could, measuring what could be measured, recording observations that might prove useful later. The scar has grown. Her voice was carefully neutral. It's spreading faster than it was before the mission. I know. At this rate you have weeks, not months. Maybe less if you use its power again. I know that too. Reyna set down her instruments and looked at him with eyes that held far more than professional concern. You're not going to stop using it, are you? Even knowing what it costs? Would you, if it meant protecting the people you love? She didn't answer. They both knew she wouldn't. Then help me make the time I have left count. Alaric met her gaze steadily. Find a way to slow the progression. Buy me weeks, days, hours, if that's all you can manage. I need to see this through. I need to know my family is safe before I go. I'll try. Reyna's voice was thick with emotion she rarely showed. I've already sent samples to specialists across 3 continents. If there's anything that can help, I'll find it. I know you will. Freya woke 3 days later. She came back to consciousness slowly, her mind struggling to process the absence of the foreign presence that had controlled her for so long. Alaric was there when her eyes opened, sitting in a chair beside her bed in the medical wing. Reyna stood nearby, ready to intervene if needed. Brother? Freya's voice was weak, confused. I'm here. What happened? I remember pain, endless pain, and voices telling me what to think, what to feel, what to do. Tears began streaming down her face. Oh God, Alaric, the things they made me do, the things they made me want to do. That wasn't you. He took her hand, held it tight. That was what they turned you into. The person who did those things wasn't Freya Thornwald. It was a weapon wearing your face. I wanted to kill you. I had my hand around your throat, and I wanted to squeeze until your neck snapped. But you didn't. Only because you stopped me. Only because you did something that... She looked at him more closely, and understanding slowly dawned. The shadow scar. You used it to pull the conditioning out of me. Yes. What did it cost you? Alaric smiled sadly. Nothing I wasn't willing to pay. Freya's face crumpled as she realized the implications. How much? How much did you lose? Enough. He squeezed her hand. But I'd do it again in a heartbeat. You're my sister. You're worth any price. Reyna moved forward then, her healer's instincts telling her that Freya needed more than emotional support. She checked the monitors, adjusted the fluid drip, performed the small rituals of care that helped ground patients in the present moment. You're safe now. Reyna's voice was warm but professional. The conditioning is completely purged. There's no residual shadow contamination, no lingering compulsions. Whatever they put in your head, it's gone. But the memories aren't. No, they aren't. Reyna met Freya's eyes with compassionate honesty. You're going to have to live with what you remember. It won't be easy. But you're not alone. You have your brother, you have this pack, and you have me whenever you need someone to talk to who isn't family." Freya nodded weakly, too exhausted for more, but something in her expression shifted, a tiny spark of hope in the darkness of her guilt. They sat together in silence for a long time, brother and sister reunited after months of separation and manipulation. Eventually, Freya found the strength to speak again. "I have information. Things they told me because they thought I would never break free. Things about the Shadow Council, about their plans, about what they really want. Tell me everything." She did. She spoke for hours, her voice growing stronger as she purged the secrets that had been forced into her mind. She told him about the Shadow Council's true goal, which wasn't just control over the supernatural world, but the complete elimination of any bloodline powerful enough to challenge them. She told him about the army they were secretly building in the Northern Territories, thousands of wolves conditioned like she had been, waiting for the signal to strike. She told him about Darius Blackmoon's private obsession with the Crimson Shield, his conviction that the bloodline possessed secrets that could grant true immortality. And she told him about the failsafe. "They implanted something in me." Her hand went to the base of her skull. "A device. If I ever broke free of the conditioning, if I ever tried to reveal their secrets, it would kill me." Ice flooded Alaric's veins. "It's still in you?" "It should have activated days ago when you extracted the conditioning. But it didn't. I don't understand why." Neither did Alaric, until he remembered something one of the Moonless Blades had said during interrogation. The failsafe devices were keyed to shadow energy. They detected the presence of Shadow Council conditioning and triggered when that conditioning disappeared. But Alaric hadn't just removed the conditioning. He had absorbed it, had pulled it into himself through the shadow scar, taking the shadow energy along with the memories and the control. The device in Freya's skull had nothing to detect. As far as it was concerned, she was still conditioned, still loyal, still under control. "The scar." His voice was rough with realization. "When I extracted the conditioning, I took the shadow energy too. The failsafe can't see that you're free because the signature it's looking for is inside me now. That means, as long as I'm alive, you're protected. The device will never activate. And when you die?" The question hung between them, heavy with implications neither wanted to face. "Then we'd better make sure we destroy the Shadow Council before that happens." Alaric stood, his decision made. "Can you walk? We need to talk to Alara. If the Council has an army in the north, we need to know about it. We need to prepare." Freya pushed herself upright, swaying slightly, but staying on her feet. Reyna moved to support her, one arm around her waist, ready to catch her if she fell. "I can walk. I can do more than walk. I know their training methods, their communication protocols, their command structure. I know where the army is hiding and how they're planning to use it." Freya's eyes hardened with determination. "They took everything from me, Alaric. My freedom, my identity, my relationship with my family. I'm going to help you burn them to the ground." "You need rest." Reyna's voice was firm. "Whatever planning needs to happen can wait until you've had proper recovery time. The Shadow Council won't wait for me to feel better. The Shadow Council has been operating for 500 years. They can wait another day." Reyna guided Freya back toward the bed. "You'll be more useful to the war effort if you're not collapsing every 5 minutes. Let me do my job." Brother and sister exchanged a glance, and despite everything, Alaric felt a smile tugging at his lips. Reyna had always been stubborn. It was one of her best qualities. "Rest," he told Freya. "I'll fill in the others on what you've told me. We can plan the details when you're stronger. Promise me you won't do anything stupid without me." "I make no promises I can't keep." "Alaric, fine. I promise not to do anything stupid without you for at least 24 hours. That's the best I can offer." Freya's laugh was weak but genuine, the first real expression of her old self that Alaric had heard since finding her in the dead forest. It was enough. It was more than enough. He left his sister in Reyna's capable hands and went to find his mate. The War Council convened that evening in the Great Hall. Every major figure in the combined pack was present: Alara and Alaric, Mordecai and Victor, Nathaniel and Marcus. Maps covered the central table, marked with troop positions and supply lines and strategic objectives. Intelligence reports from the interrogated Moonless Blades were stacked beside them, cross-referenced with Freya's insider knowledge. The picture they painted was grim. The Shadow Council's army numbers approximately 3,000. Mordecai's voice was calm, analytical. They're encamped in the northern mountain territories, spread across 7 hidden bases that are connected by tunnel systems. Most of them are conditioned like Freya was, weapons rather than soldiers. 3,000. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. We have maybe 500 warriors between our combined forces. 6-to-1 odds. Numbers aren't everything. Marcus spoke from his position near the fireplace, his deep voice commanding attention despite his deliberate distance from the central table. I've seen smaller forces defeat larger ones when they had better leadership, better strategy, better reasons to fight. The question is whether we fight them at all. Alara looked around the table, meeting each pair of eyes in turn. The Shadow Council's immediate goal is Aaron. If we can protect him, if we can eliminate their agents in our midst and show them that their assassination plans have failed, they may decide to wait, to regroup, to find another approach. They'll never stop. The voice came from the doorway, where Freya stood supported by Reyna, who had clearly lost the argument about bed rest. I've seen inside their minds, felt their obsession. They've been working toward this for 500 years. They won't abandon their plans because of a single setback. They'll come back stronger, smarter, more determined. You should be resting. Alaric moved toward his sister, concern overriding his tactical focus. I should be helping. Freya let Reyna guide her to a chair, accepting the support with grace that spoke of how weak she still felt. I know things none of you do, things that could mean the difference between victory and annihilation. Then share them from a sitting position. Reyna's voice was sharp. And if you try to stand up again before I give permission, I will sedate you. Understood. Freya turned her attention to the assembled council. The Shadow Council's greatest weakness is their arrogance. They've operated in shadows for so long that they've forgotten how to fight in the open. Their army is powerful but brittle. The conditioning that makes them obedient also makes them inflexible. They can't adapt to unexpected situations. How do we exploit that? By giving them something they don't expect. A direct strike at their leadership. Kill Malachar, Selene, and Darius, and the conditioning loses its anchor. The army becomes a mob rather than a coordinated force. 3 alphas who have survived for centuries by being impossible to kill. Nathaniel's skepticism was evident. They'll be protected, hidden, surrounded by loyal guards who haven't been conditioned and are genuinely devoted to the cause. Then we give them a reason to come out of hiding. Freya leaned forward, her eyes bright with a plan taking shape despite her exhaustion. Me. I'm still registered as an active asset in their system. The failsafe hasn't triggered, which means they think I'm still under control. I could get close to them, close enough to create an opening. Absolutely not. Alaric's response was immediate. You just escaped their control. I won't let you walk back into their hands. It's not your choice to make, brother. Freya's voice was gentle but firm. This is my fight, too. They took my mind. They made me into a weapon against my own family. I have the right to face them. I have the right to be part of their destruction. The siblings stared at each other across the table, a silent battle of wills that ended when Alaric looked away first. If you're going, he said quietly, I'm going with you. You can barely remember your own name. You'll be a liability. My memory is damaged. My ability to fight isn't. And the shadow scar gives me capabilities that no one else possesses. He met her eyes again. We do this together, Freya, or we don't do it at all. For a moment, she looked like she might argue. Then a small smile crossed her face. Together, then, like when we were kids and used to sneak into Father's study to steal sweets from his desk. I don't remember that. I know, but I do, and maybe that's enough. Plans continued to form. Strategies were debated and refined. By midnight, they had the outline of an operation that was either brilliant or suicidal, possibly both. Mordecai would lead the main force in a feint against the Northern Army, drawing attention and resources toward a threat that seemed conventional. While the Shadow Council's forces were engaged, a small strike team would infiltrate their command structure using Freya's credentials and the chaos of battle as cover. Alaric, Freya, Victor, and 3 of the most skilled warriors from Mordecai's company would form the strike team. Their target was Moonstone Citadel, the Shadow Council's hidden headquarters, where all 3 alpha leaders were believed to be coordinating the war effort. Alara would remain at the compound with the bulk of their defensive forces, protecting Aaron and maintaining the appearance of vulnerability. Reyna would stay as well, her medical expertise too valuable to risk on an offensive operation. Marcus had argued for his inclusion in the strike team, but Alaric had overruled him. I need you here, Father. If the strike fails, if we don't come back, Alara will need someone with experience to help guide the defense." He had paused, struggling with words that had never come easily between them. "And I need to know that my family is protected by someone I trust." Marcus had stared at his son for a long moment, something shifting behind his weathered eyes. "You trust me?" "I'm trying to. Give me a reason to keep trying." "I will." The old Alpha's voice had been rough with emotion. "I swear it on your mother's memory. Whatever happens, I will protect your family with my life." It was the closest thing to reconciliation they had managed. It would have to be enough. Alaric found Alara in their chambers later that night. She was standing at the window, looking out at the moonlit forest, one hand resting on her abdomen where their daughter grew. "You're really going?" It wasn't a question. "I have to." "I know." She turned to face him, and in the silver light, she had never looked more beautiful. "I hate it, but I understand. Freya needs you, the mission needs you, and you need to do this." "How do you know what I need when I barely remember who I am?" "Because some things don't require memory." She closed the distance between them, taking his hands in hers. "Your honor is still there. Your courage. Your stubborn refusal to let the people you love face danger alone. Those aren't things you learned, Alaric. They're things you are." He pulled her close, holding her as if he could memorize the feeling through his skin, since his mind could no longer be trusted to retain it. "I may not come back." "You will." Her voice was fierce with conviction. "Because I refuse to accept any other outcome. Because our daughter needs her father. Because I need my mate. Because I have spent too long fighting to build this life to lose you now. If I don't, no." She silenced him with a kiss, pouring everything she felt into that single point of contact. "No goodbyes. No final words. You're coming back to me, Alaric Thornwald. That's not a hope. That's an order from your Alpha." Despite everything, he smiled. "As my Alpha commands." They held each other through the night, speaking little, needing no words. The past was a fog that Alaric might never fully recover. The future was a battlefield waiting to claim them. But for these few hours, there was only the present, only the warmth of the woman he loved, only the steady rhythm of their shared heartbeat. And when dawn finally came, Alaric rose to prepare for war with something he hadn't felt since the shadow scar first began consuming him. Hope. Hope that he might survive. Hope that his family might be safe. Hope that somewhere on the other side of the coming battle there was a future worth fighting for. Hope that the man he used to be might have been proud of the man he had become. It would have to be enough. Moonstone Citadel rose from the northern mountains like a monument to ambition and cruelty. Its black stone walls had been carved directly from the mountain itself, creating a fortress that seemed to grow from the earth rather than stand upon it. Towers pierced the gray sky at irregular intervals, their windows glowing with sickly green light that spoke of shadow magic and forbidden rituals. For 500 years, the Shadow Council had ruled from within those walls. For 500 years, they had manipulated the fate of supernatural kind from the safety of their impregnable stronghold. Tonight, that safety would end. Alaric crouched behind a snow-covered boulder, studying the citadel through eyes enhanced by the shadow scar. The darkness showed him things that normal vision could never perceive. Guard rotations marked by trails of shadow energy. Defensive wards that shimmered like spiderwebs across every entrance. The pulsing heart of power at the Citadel's center where the 3 Alpha leaders coordinated their war. Beside him, Freya checked her weapons for the 3rd time. The conditioning might be gone from her mind, but the skills the Shadow Council had given her remained. She moved with the lethal efficiency of an assassin, every gesture economical and precise. The sister he remembered teaching to climb trees had become something far more dangerous. Victor and the 3 Crimson Shield warriors waited in positions around the perimeter, ready to create diversions when the signal came. Somewhere to the south, Mordecai's forces were engaging the Shadow Council's army, drawing attention and resources away from the Citadel. Everything was in place. Everything except certainty that any of them would survive. "The main entrance is too heavily guarded." Freya's whisper barely carried over the mountain wind. "But there's a service tunnel that runs from the old mines into the lower levels. I used it during my time here. It's not on any official maps." "Traps?" "Some. I know where they are." "And if they've changed the configuration since you left?" "Then we improvise." She met his eyes with a grim smile. "You always were better at improvising than me." Some things don't change even when memory does. They moved out, ghosting across the snow-covered approach in patterns designed to avoid the patrol routes Alaric could see through the scar. The cold bit through their clothing, but neither complained. Discomfort was irrelevant. Only the mission mattered. The mine entrance was exactly where Freya remembered, hidden behind a rockfall that looked natural but concealed a narrow passage. They squeezed through single file, emerging into darkness so complete that even Alaric's enhanced vision struggled to penetrate it. But the shadow scar thrived in darkness. It fed on the absence of light, growing stronger with every step deeper into the mountain. Alaric felt it pulsing beneath his skin, whispering secrets about the tunnels ahead. Trap here, guard there, ancient ward that would trigger if crossed without the proper sigil. He led them through the labyrinth with confidence he shouldn't have possessed, navigating by shadow sense rather than memory or map. Freya followed close behind, her presence a comfort despite everything that had happened between them. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The service tunnel eventually opened into a storage chamber filled with crates and barrels. Beyond it, a stairway carved into the living rock spiraled upward toward the citadel's inhabited levels. They were inside the perimeter defenses now, past the outer wards that would have detected any normal intruder. The shadow scar had made Alaric something other than normal. The council chamber is 3 levels up. Freya pointed toward the stairway. If my information is correct, all 3 alphas will be there coordinating the response to Mordecai's attack. And if your information isn't correct, then we search room by room until we find them. They ascended in silence, pausing at each landing to let Alaric scan for threats. The citadel was surprisingly empty. Most of the garrison had been deployed south to meet Mordecai's force, leaving only essential personnel to maintain operations. The Shadow Council's arrogance was working in their favor. They couldn't conceive of anyone being bold enough to attack their headquarters directly. That arrogance was about to cost them everything. The council chamber occupied the entire top floor of the central tower. Massive doors of ironwood and silver barred the entrance, inscribed with protective sigils that had been accumulating power for centuries. Breaking through by force would take hours and alert everyone in the citadel. Fortunately, Freya had a key. She pressed her palm against a specific point on the door's surface, and the sigils flared briefly before dying. The doors swung open on silent hinges, revealing the chamber beyond. It was smaller than Alaric had expected. A circular room perhaps 50 feet across, dominated by a massive table carved from a single block of obsidian. Maps and documents covered its surface, illuminated by floating spheres of green light that cast strange shadows on the walls. 3 figures stood around the table, their attention fixed on the tactical display showing the battle unfolding to the south. 3 alphas whose combined age exceeded a millennium. 3 architects of 500 years of manipulation and murder. Malachar the Elder was ancient beyond description, his body bent with age but his eyes burning with power that defied the weakness of flesh. Selene Blackthorn stood tall and terrible, her beauty preserved by dark magic that couldn't quite hide the cruelty beneath. And Darius Blackmoon, head of the official council of alphas, whose public face of justice concealed a heart of absolute corruption. They looked up as the doors opened, and for one frozen moment, no one moved. Then Selene laughed. "The Thornwald whelp." Her voice was musical and mocking. "Come to avenge your stolen memories? How delightfully predictable. And our little weapon has returned." Darius studied Freya with clinical interest. "The failsafe should have killed you days ago. How intriguing that it didn't. Because I absorbed the shadow energy when I freed her." Alaric stepped forward, placing himself between his sister and the 3 alphas. "Your failsafe has nothing to detect." "Ah!" Malachar spoke for the first time, his voice like gravel scraping over bone. "The shadow scar. We wondered what had become of that particular gift from Abraxas. It seems to have found a worthy host." "I'm not here to talk. No. You're here to kill us." The ancient alpha didn't seem concerned by the prospect. "Many have tried over the centuries. Warriors and assassins and would-be heroes beyond counting. Their bones decorate our deepest dungeons." He spread his withered hands in a gesture of welcome. "By all means, young wolf, make your attempt." Alaric moved. The shadow scar exploded outward, tendrils of darkness lashing toward the 3 alphas with killing intent. Freya moved with him, her blade seeking Selene's throat while the shadow assault occupied the others. It was a coordinated attack, practiced in the brief time they had together, designed to overwhelm through speed and surprise. It failed. Malakar's hand rose, and the shadow tendrils shattered against a barrier of pure white light. Celine twisted away from Freya's blade with preternatural grace, her own claws extending to rake across the younger woman's arm. Darius didn't bother with physical combat at all. He simply spoke a word, and Alaric found himself slammed against the far wall by invisible force. "Did you really think it would be that easy?" Celine circled Freya like a cat playing with wounded prey. "We have survived for centuries because we are the strongest, the smartest, the most ruthless. Your little ambush was anticipated from the moment your sister regained consciousness." "Then why let us get this far?" Freya clutched her bleeding arm but didn't retreat. "Why not kill us at the tunnel entrance?" "Because we wanted to see the shadow scar in action." Malakar moved toward Alaric with slow, deliberate steps. "It's a remarkable piece of work, Abraxas's final gift to the mortal realm before his imprisonment. The ability to absorb and manipulate shadow energy, to see through darkness, to consume the very essence of those touched by the void." He reached out and pressed one skeletal finger against Alaric's chest, directly over the scar. Such power, such potential, wasted on a dying wolf who doesn't understand what he carries. "I understand enough. Do you? Do you understand that the scar is slowly replacing your soul? That every memory it consumes becomes part of its growing consciousness? That eventually there will be nothing left of Alaric Thornwald but a shell animated by shadow?" The words struck deeper than any physical blow. Alaric had suspected something like this, had felt the scar growing stronger even as he grew weaker, but hearing it confirmed by an enemy who had no reason to lie was devastating. "You're trying to make me afraid. I'm trying to make you understand your options." Malakar's ancient eyes held something that might have been genuine interest. "You could die here tonight, and the scar would dissipate with your death. A waste. Or you could join us. Let us study the scar. Let us help you master it rather than be consumed by it. In return, you would have power beyond imagining, life extended for centuries, a place at our side as we reshape the supernatural world. You murdered my family. You tried to kill my son. You turned my sister into a weapon against everything she loved. Necessary steps toward a greater goal. The Crimson Shield bloodline was too dangerous to exist unchecked. The child Aeron is an abomination that threatens the fabric of reality itself. And Freya..." He glanced toward where Celine was still circling the wounded woman. "Freya was simply a useful tool that has now outlived her purpose." "No." Alaric's voice was quiet, but absolute. "My family is not a tool, not a threat to be eliminated, not a resource to be exploited. They are everything I have left, and I will die before I let you touch them again." "That can be arranged." The barrier holding Alaric against the wall began to constrict, pressing the air from his lungs. He felt his ribs creak under the pressure, felt consciousness beginning to slip away. And then the shadow scar spoke to him, not in words, not in thoughts that could be clearly articulated, but in images and impulses and understanding that flowed directly into his mind. It showed him what he truly was. Not just a man infected with shadow, but a bridge between worlds, a conduit for power that the Shadow Council couldn't begin to comprehend. The scar wasn't consuming him. It was merging with him, becoming something new, something that had never existed before, something that the three ancient alphas had every reason to fear. Alaric stopped fighting the pressure and instead drew it into himself. The force that was crushing him became fuel for the scar, shadow energy that it devoured with hungry efficiency. The barrier flickered, weakened, and then shattered entirely. He dropped to the floor and rose in one fluid motion, moving faster than he ever had before. The scar extended from his hands like blades of pure darkness, cutting through Malakar's protective light with ease that should have been impossible. The ancient alpha's eyes widened in shock. "What are you?" "I don't know anymore." Alaric's voice resonated with harmonics that weren't entirely human. "But I know what you are, and I know what you've done, and I know that it ends tonight." The battle that followed would become legend among supernatural kind. Alaric fought all three alphas simultaneously, the shadow scar giving him abilities that seemed to multiply with every passing second. He absorbed their attacks and converted them to power. He moved through shadows as if they were doorways, appearing behind enemies who expected him to be in front. He matched centuries of experience with an instinct that came from somewhere beyond mortal understanding. But 3 against 1 were still terrible odds, even with the scar's enhancement. Celine's claws found his shoulder, tearing through muscle and scraping bone. Darius's words of power hammered at his mind, trying to shatter his concentration. Malakar's light magic burned wherever it touched, fighting the shadow essence that had become inseparable from Alaric's being. He was winning, but he was also dying. The damage was accumulating faster than even the scar could heal. Every wound cost him more than blood. Every moment of combat burned away more of whatever remained of his original self. Freya screamed his name from across the chamber, but he couldn't spare the attention to look. Couldn't afford to lose focus for even a second against opponents who would exploit any weakness. And then the doors exploded inward. Victor Hale led the charge, the 3 Crimson Shield warriors at his back. They had heard the sounds of combat and abandoned their diversionary positions, converging on the central tower with every weapon they possessed. It was a violation of the plan, a risk that could have gotten them all killed. But it also turned 3 against 1 into 3 against 6. Victor engaged Celine with the skill of a warrior who had spent 50 years perfecting his craft. 2 of the Crimson Shield fighters attacked Darius, disrupting his concentration and preventing him from using his word magic effectively. The 3rd joined Freya in harrying Malakar, creating openings that Alaric ruthlessly exploited. The battle shifted. Celine fell first, Victor's blade finding her heart while she was distracted by a shadow tendril around her ankle. She died with a look of absolute disbelief on her beautiful face. 5 centuries of existence ended by a soldier she had considered beneath her notice. Darius fell second, overwhelmed by the 2 warriors who refused to give him space to speak his killing words. They died in the process, their lives sacrificed to silence the voice that had condemned thousands to death over the centuries. That left Malakar. The ancient Alpha stood alone in the center of the chamber, surrounded by enemies, watching his carefully constructed empire collapse around him. Blood from a dozen wounds stained his robes. His protective light flickered and sputtered like a dying candle, but his eyes still burned with the fanatical conviction of someone who believed absolutely in the righteousness of his cause. "You think this changes anything?" His voice was steady despite everything. "We are not the Shadow Council. The Shadow Council is an idea, a vision of what the supernatural world could become under proper guidance. You can kill us, but you cannot kill what we represent." "Maybe not." Alaric stepped forward, shadow blades extended from both hands. "But I can make a hell of a start." "Wait." Freya's voice cut through the tension. "He knows things, the locations of other cells, the identities of agents we haven't uncovered, the conditioning protocols that could free thousands of wolves like me." "She's right." Victor moved to flank the ancient Alpha, preventing any escape. "Dead, he's just a symbol. Alive, he's a resource." Alaric hesitated. Everything in him screamed for blood, for vengeance, for the satisfaction of destroying the creature that had caused so much suffering. But Freya's logic was sound. Malakar's death would feel good. Malakar's knowledge could save lives. "Bind him." The words tasted like ash in his mouth. "We take him back for interrogation." Malakar laughed, a dry, rattling sound that held no humor. "You think chains can hold me? I've escaped from prisons that make your dungeons look like children's playthings." "You haven't escaped from the shadow scar." Alaric extended tendrils of darkness that wrapped around the ancient Alpha like living shackles. Unlike physical bonds, these couldn't be broken by strength or magic. They were part of Malakar now, shadow essence that had infiltrated his very being. "Try to escape," Alaric said quietly, "and the scar will consume you from within. Cooperate, and you get to live long enough to see everything you built reduced to rubble." For the first time, something like fear flickered in Malakar's ancient eyes. The journey home took 3 days. They moved slowly, hampered by their prisoner and wounded. Victor had taken severe damage in his fight with Celine, deep claw marks across his chest and side that Freya did her best to treat with the limited supplies they carried. But without proper medical care, without Reyna's expertise and equipment, the wounds festered. On the second night of travel, Victor called Alaric to his side. "I'm not going to make it." The old soldier's voice was steady, accepting. "I've seen enough battlefield injuries to know when a man is done. We're less than a day from home. Reyna can't fix what's already rotted." Victor coughed, and blood flecked his lips. "Celine's claws were poisoned, some shadow venom that's eating me from the inside. I've been trying to hide it, but He grimaced as another spasm of pain racked his body. There's no coming back from this. Alaric knelt beside the dying man, feeling the weight of another failure settling onto his shoulders. I'm sorry. I should have planned better. Should have found another way. You did what needed to be done. The Shadow Council is broken. Malachar is in chains. Selene and Darius are dead. Victor managed a smile that was more grimace than expression. That's a victory worth dying for. It shouldn't have cost your life. Everything costs something. Victor's eyes grew distant, looking at something Alaric couldn't see. I've been a soldier for 50 years, fought in wars that history has forgotten, served commanders good and bad, made choices I'm proud of, and choices that haunt me still. He focused on Alaric's face again. Dying in service to something that matters? That's a gift, not a tragedy. Is there anything I can do, anything you need? Find Nathaniel. Tell him. Victor's voice caught, and for a moment the stoic soldier facade cracked. Tell him I'm sorry we ended up on opposite sides for so long. Tell him I never forgot the battles we fought together, the blood we spilled, the brothers we buried. Tell him that in the end, I found my way back to the right side. I'll tell him, and tell the general. Victor paused, gathering strength for words that mattered. Tell Mordecai that I kept my oath, that I served faithfully to the end, that I was proud to follow him. I'll tell him that too. Victor nodded, seeming satisfied. His breathing was growing shallow now, each inhale a struggle against the poison coursing through his veins. It's strange. I always thought I'd be afraid when the end came, but I'm not. I'm just tired, ready to rest. Then rest. Alaric took the dying man's hand, holding it tight. You've earned it. Victor's eyes closed, his breathing slowed, and in the gray light of pre-dawn, surrounded by the warriors he had fought beside, Victor Hale passed from the world as quietly as he had lived in it. They buried him on a hillside overlooking the valley, with words spoken by Freya and prayers offered by the surviving Crimson Shield warrior. Alaric stood apart, watching the simple ceremony, feeling the shadow scar pulse with hungry interest at the death nearby. He pushed it down, controlled it, refused to let it feed on Victor's passing. Some things were too sacred for Shadow. Thornwald territory welcomed them with relief that bordered on hysteria. Word of the Shadow Council's fall had spread ahead of their return, and the compound was alive with celebration. But Alaric couldn't share in the joy. Not yet. Nathaniel met them at the gates, his face drawn with concern, until he saw the prisoner in shadow chains. Then understanding dawned, followed by something that might have been relief. Victor? The single word carried a lifetime of hope and dread. Didn't make it. Alaric's voice was rough with exhaustion and grief. He asked me to give you a message. They stepped aside from the celebration, finding a quiet corner where private words could be exchanged. Alaric delivered Victor's final message, watching as Nathaniel's stoic facade crumbled, as decades of professional distance gave way to the grief of losing someone who had been closer than a brother. He came back. Nathaniel's voice was thick with tears he refused to let fall. After all those years on opposite sides, he came back. He never really left. He just got lost for a while. They stood together in silence, two men mourning a third, bound by shared loss and the complicated mathematics of war. Alara found them there an hour later, her face glowing with something that made Alaric's heart skip despite his exhaustion. Raina wants to see you. Her voice held a barely contained excitement. Both of you. The medical wing was bustling with activity, wounded warriors being treated, supplies being restocked after the extended campaign. But Raina pulled Alaric into her private office, closing the door behind them with an expression of suppressed triumph. I found something. She thrust a sheaf of papers into his hands. In Mordecai's archives, from the old Crimson Shield records, a technique for stabilizing shadow essence. It won't cure you, but it might buy you time. Significant time. Alaric scanned the documents, understanding perhaps one word in 10, but grasping the essential point. How significant? Years instead of weeks. Maybe decades if we're careful. Raina's professional demeanor cracked, letting genuine hope shine through. You're not saved, Alaric. The scar is still there, still hungry, still dangerous. But it doesn't have to consume you, not if we can achieve equilibrium. Years. Decades. Time enough to see his daughter born. Time enough to watch Aaron grow up. Time enough to rebuild with Alara and repair what had been broken between him and his father. Time enough to live. What do we need to do? That's the complicated part. Raina pulled out more documents, spreading them across her desk. The technique requires a specific type of meditation, daily rituals that balance shadow and light, and it requires you to stop using the scar's power except in absolute emergencies. Every time you tap into it, you destabilize the equilibrium. I can do that. You'll have to. Your life depends on it. She met his eyes with the stern compassion that made her such an effective healer. This isn't a cure, Alaric. It's management. You'll be living with this thing inside you for the rest of your life, but that life could be long and full if you're willing to do the work. I'm willing. He looked at Alara, who had been listening with barely concealed tears of relief. I'm more than willing. 7 months passed. Spring gave way to summer, and summer faded into autumn. The Shadow Council's remnants were systematically dismantled, their cells exposed and destroyed, their conditioned soldiers freed and rehabilitated. Malakar's interrogation revealed enough secrets to keep Nathaniel's intelligence division busy for years. The old Alpha himself remained in shadow chains, confined to a specially constructed cell deep beneath the compound. He would live out whatever remained of his existence in darkness, surrounded by the very element he had tried to control. Mordecai's forces integrated fully with the Thornwald Pack, creating a combined military capability that made them the dominant power in the supernatural world. The general himself accepted a formal position as Alara's military advisor, his centuries of experience finally put to constructive use. And Alaric, following Reyna's protocols with religious dedication, found himself living instead of dying. The shadow scar did not disappear. He could still feel it beneath his skin, still heard its whispers in moments of darkness, still struggled against its hunger during the full moon. But it no longer consumed him. The equilibrium Reyna had discovered held, balanced precariously, but holding nonetheless. His memories didn't return. 10 years of his life remained a fog, accessible only through the stories others told him about who he had been. But new memories formed, sharp and clear, building a future even as the past remained lost. On a cold autumn morning, 7 months after the fall of the Shadow Council, Alaric stood outside the medical wing and listened to the sounds of his wife in labor. Reyna had forbidden him from the delivery room, citing his tendency to hover and interfere. You're the Alpha's mate, not a medical professional. Let me do my job and you can meet your daughter when she's ready. So he paced and worried and tried not to think about all the things that could go wrong. Marcus found him there an hour into the labor, the old Alpha moving with a grace that belied his years. Their relationship had improved slowly over the months, rebuilt through small moments of connection and the shared project of preparing for the baby's arrival. You're going to wear a hole in the floor. Marcus's voice held gentle amusement. I paced exactly the same way when your mother was delivering you. How did you handle it? Badly. I think I threatened to execute 3 servants and challenged my own beta to a duel before she finally sent someone to tell me to calm down. A rare smile crossed Marcus's weathered face. Apparently I was more of a hindrance than a help. Sounds familiar. They stood together in comfortable silence, father and son, waiting for the next generation to arrive. The birth took another 6 hours. Alaric heard every cry, every encouraging word from Reyna, every moment of struggle from Alara. And when the final scream gave way to a different sound, the high, thin wail of a newborn announcing herself to the world, he felt tears streaming down his face without shame. Reyna emerged 20 minutes later, her scrub stained and her face exhausted but radiant. You have a daughter. She stepped aside, gesturing toward the door. She's perfect. They both are. Alaric entered the room on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. Alara lay in the bed, propped up by pillows, looking more beautiful than he had ever seen her despite the exhaustion etched into every line of her face. And in her arms, wrapped in a blanket that Freya had knitted during the long months of waiting, was the smallest, most perfect creature he had ever encountered. Meet Helena! Alara's voice was rough from hours of effort. Helena Thornwald. The baby's eyes opened, unfocused, but already holding hints of the crimson that would mark her as Crimson Shield. She was impossibly tiny, impossibly fragile, impossibly real. Our daughter. Alaric reached out, one finger gently touching the baby's cheek. She's actually here. She's actually here. Alara smiled, and in that smile was every hope and dream and prayer they had shared over the past months. You made it, Alaric. You're here to meet her. I promised I would be. You did. She shifted the baby, making room. Would you like to hold her? The weight of his daughter in his arms was both nothing and everything. She was so light, so delicate, so completely dependent on him and Alara and the pack that had become their family. Looking down at her face, at the future they had fought and bled and sacrificed to create, Alaric felt something shift in his chest. The shadow scar pulsed, as it always did, but for the first time, the pulse felt less like hunger and more like acknowledgement, like even the darkness within him recognized that some things were worth protecting. "Hello, Helena." His voice was barely a whisper. "I'm your father. I know I probably won't remember everything I should, and I might seem strange sometimes when the shadows get too loud, but I want you to know something." He pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. "I love you. I have loved you since before you existed, when you were just a hope and a dream. And I will love you for every day I have left, whether that's years or decades or forever." The baby's hand wrapped around his finger, gripped surprisingly strong for something so small. And in that moment, holding his daughter while his mate watched with tears of joy, Alaric Thornwald finally understood what it meant to have hope. The seasons turned. Helena grew from infant to toddler to child with a speed that seemed impossible. She took her first steps at 10 months, spoke her first words at a year, shifted into wolf form for the first time at 3, the youngest such transformation in recorded Thornwald history. Aaron grew alongside her, the adopted son who had become as much family as any blood relation. His powers remained strange and unpredictable, but under Mordecai's careful guidance, he learned to control them, to use them for protection rather than destruction. Freya recovered from her ordeal slowly but completely. She became Helena's godmother, spoiling the child with gifts and attention that made Alara roll her eyes and Alaric smile. The shadow of what the Shadow Council had done to her never fully faded, but she learned to live with it, to transform trauma into strength. Marcus remained a fixture of the compound, the grandfather figure he had never been able to be before. His relationship with Alaric continued to heal, built on shared purpose and the slow accumulation of moments that mattered. And Reyna watched over them all, the healer who had saved Alaric's life, not through dramatic intervention, but through patience and research and the stubborn refusal to accept defeat. 6 months after Helena's birth, Alaric stood before the assembled pack and made an announcement that surprised no one who had been paying attention. "I am stepping down as co-alpha." The words fell into a silence that was more accepting than shocked. Even those who didn't know the full truth about the Shadow Scar understood that Alaric had been pulling back from active leadership for months. "My mate will continue as Alpha. She has more than proven her capability. The pack will be in good hands." He looked at Alara, who stood beside him with Helena in her arms and Aaron at her side. "I will remain as her advisor, her protector, her husband. I may not lead anymore, but I will serve, for as long as I am able, for as long as she will have me." Alara stepped forward, taking his hand in hers. "This pack was built on the bond between our bloodlines. Thornwald and Crimson Shield, united against common enemies. That bond remains, regardless of titles or positions. Alaric Thornwald is my mate, my partner, and my equal. Nothing will ever change that." The pack's response was thunderous approval. Whatever concerns they might have had about leadership transition were drowned in the outpouring of support for both their alphas. That night, alone in their chambers, Alara held Alaric as the emotions of the day finally broke through his control. "You're not gone yet." Her voice was fierce against his ear. "You're here. You're alive. You're still fighting." "I know, but saying it out loud, admitting that I can't lead anymore." He shook his head against her shoulder. "It feels like failure." "It feels like wisdom." She pulled back to look into his eyes. "You're choosing to protect this pack by stepping back before you become a liability. That's not weakness, Alaric. That's strength. When did you become so wise?" "I've always been wise. You just weren't paying attention." She kissed him gently. "Now stop feeling sorry for yourself and come to bed. Our daughter will be awake in 4 hours, and I intend to get every minute of sleep I can before then." The years that followed brought their share of challenges. Malachar escaped 6 months after Helena's first birthday, using knowledge accumulated over millennia and tricks that even the Shadow Scar couldn't anticipate. He killed 3 guards in his escape, disappeared into the wilderness like smoke dissolving into fog. Nathaniel led the hunt for weeks, tracking leads that went cold one after another. Eventually, they had to accept that the ancient Alpha had vanished, a threat that lurked somewhere in the world, nursing hatred and plotting revenge. Alaric knew they would face him again someday, knew that the final confrontation had only been postponed, not prevented. But that day was not today, and today was all any of them truly had. Aaron's powers continued to grow in ways that no one fully understood. By his 4th birthday, he could step between shadows as easily as walking through doorways. By his 5th, he had begun having visions of possible futures, glimpses of timelines that might or might not come to pass. Mordecai worked with him daily, teaching control and discipline, helping him understand that power without wisdom was just another form of destruction. There would be conflicts ahead. The boy who carried both shadow and light within him would eventually have to choose what kind of man he wanted to become. But Alaric watched him play with Helena, watched the gentle way he protected his younger sister, watched the kindness that defined his interactions with the pack, and believed that when the time came, Aaron would choose well. Freya found her own path in the aftermath of the Shadow Council's fall. She established a network of safe houses across the continent, places where conditioned wolves could go to have their programming broken, their minds healed, their lives reclaimed. The work was exhausting and often heartbreaking, but it gave her purpose, gave her a way to transform her trauma into something that helped others. She visited the compound regularly, always bringing gifts for Helena and stories from her travels. The darkness of what had been done to her never fully faded, but she learned to carry it without being crushed by its weight. In her better moments, she even found peace. Marcus surprised everyone by becoming the grandfather no one expected. The stern, demanding alpha who had driven his son away with impossible expectations softened in his final years. He spent hours playing with Helena, teaching her the old songs and stories that had been passed down through generations of Thornwald wolves. He reconciled with Alaric in ways that felt like miracles, late-night conversations that healed wounds decades old. He passed away peacefully in his sleep 3 years after Helena's birth, surrounded by family, content in the knowledge that his legacy would continue. Alaric mourned him deeply, mourned not just the father he had lost, but the father he had found too late. But there was gratitude mixed with the grief. They had been given time to make things right. Many never received even that much. Reyna continued her tireless work, keeping Alaric's condition stable, monitoring the pack's health, training the next generation of healers. She never married, never had children of her own, but she became aunt and grandmother figure to dozens of young wolves who needed guidance. Her dedication never wavered, her skill never diminished, her compassion never exhausted. Helena became everything they had hoped she would be, and more. Strong, determined, kind. The Crimson Shield bloodline had evolved into something new in her, something that combined the best of both her parents' legacies. And Alaric lived. Not just survived, but truly lived. The shadow scar remained, a constant companion that whispered in dark moments and stirred during full moons. But the equilibrium held. The protocols Reyna had discovered gave him years instead of weeks, decades instead of months. On the night of Helena's 5th birthday, he stood on the balcony of the Alpha compound and watched the moon rise over mountains that had seen more conflict than any other place in the supernatural world. Elara joined him, as she always did, her presence a comfort that time had only deepened. Helena asked about the shadow scar today. Her voice was soft in the darkness. She wanted to know why Daddy sometimes talks to himself. "What did you tell her?" "That you have a special friend who lives inside you. A friend who makes you strong but also makes you sad sometimes." Elara smiled at the memory. She said she wanted a friend like that too. God, I hope not. She's 5. She'll want different things next week. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the moon climb higher. The pack slept peacefully below them, protected by wards and warriors and the reputation of those who had defeated the Shadow Council against impossible odds. "I remembered something today." Alaric spoke quietly, almost afraid to disturb the moment. "Our first kiss. Behind your grandmother's cabin, after you beat me in a sparring match." Alara's breath caught. "That was almost 20 years ago." "I know. The scar took it from me, back when it was still hungry for everything I had. But it came back. Just a fragment, just a few seconds, but..." He turned to look at her, wonder in his eyes. "I remember. Maybe others will come back too. Maybe." He pulled her close, feeling her warmth against the cold mountain air. Or maybe this is all I get. Maybe the darkness keeps everything else and I just have this one moment for the rest of my life. Is that enough? He thought about the question seriously, thought about everything he had lost and everything he still had. His wife beside him, his children sleeping safely below, his pack united and strong, his sister recovered and thriving, his father present and loving in ways he had never been before, and one perfect memory of a kiss that had started everything. Yes. The word came out with certainty he hadn't expected to feel. Yes, it's enough. The moon continued its slow arc across the sky. The wind carried sounds of the night forest, of creatures going about their lives unaware of the battles that had been fought to keep them safe. And two people who had survived impossible odds held each other and faced whatever came next together. Not an ending. A beginning. Always a beginning.